Hey, it's Bug. I wanted to make a follow-up video to my beginner Tekken guide where I elaborate a bit more on frame data and punishes. I still think the frame data and punishment training sections of my guide are great for players just starting off, but I wanted to iron out some things for those that want to keep pushing these concepts and their overall gameplay. If you haven't watched my beginner Tekken guide, please feel free to give it a watch. Okay, so first I wanted to clarify some things about frame data from my beginner guide, and I also wanted to just elaborate a little more on frame data itself. I'm actually going to start by making a slight correction from my beginner guide. So in my video, I said that if a move was -5, then you could outspeed their frame 10 jab with with a frame 15 launcher. So basically I meant if they were -5, you could launch them. That's actually wrong. I'm going to put a nice graphic up now to explain why that's wrong. But basically, a move needs to be -6 for you to outspeed it with a frame 15 launcher because their jab's frame 10, so they need to have that 16 frames. If they are -5, then it would result in you trading with their jab. You wouldn't actually get your launch off. This is really important to know going forward, so I really wanted to clear that up. I felt bad that I said -5 when in reality it is -6 to guarantee that launcher if you have a frame 15 launcher. Realistically, you might be able to hit the frame 15 punish if they're, -5 because they might not be executing that jab on the first frame, but you probably shouldn't be relying on the other player's lack of skill, execution, or awareness, whatever you want to call it. Okay, so we're going to start off talking about frame data by looking at our mid punishes on block a little bit deeper in terms of like the actual frames. So first thing we're going to look at is our frame 15 launcher. So on moves like this, where we should be getting that launch every time, we're going to look at the actual frame data of it. This is a frame 17 move that is -21 on block. Okay, we should always be launching stuff like this. So really high commitment moves, usually launchers, rage arts, stuff like that. You really want to be learning when you can get your frame 15 launcher on every character. And yeah, it's just really important because you get the most off of your frame 15 launcher usually, and you also usually get really punished if you're going for that move at the wrong time. So it's really important to learn when you should be going for that. Now, next thing we're going to look at is frame 13 or 14 moves. This specifically is a frame 13 situation where Kuma can get, oops, wrong move, where Kuma can get this heat engager off of this -13 move. Okay, so it's really important to understand what your frame 13 and 14 moves are, because they're usually useful in some way. Like Kuma's a heat engager in this situation, or you might be lucky enough to have a combo tool that's frame 14 or 13. But you need to know this against characters that's really difficult to get your frame 15 launcher on, or just players in general that are playing around that frame 15 sort of limit really well. So it's just important to recognize those moves. And then sort of going off of the same, I guess, wavelength is learning your frame 12 moves. So when you can get those frame 12 punishes. So you're usually, at least in Kuma's case, I have multiple moves here, so I gotta react to whether it's 1 or 2 hits, but I'm not going to get as much of a combo off of this, but this is a relatively safer option to go for when I don't necessarily know how safe something's going to be, but I don't want to go for that jab. If the other player is aware of that jab game, that's where this is going to possibly become unsafe depending on the specific frame data. But something is a lot more likely to be -3 to get outsped, to outspeed their jab, or it's going to be -13 where you can just get a hit if they're trying to block. That's more likely than fishing for your frame 15 launches. Just those 3 frames matters a lot. And then last thing I sort of wanted to touch on was just your your frame 10 jab options. So when you have to go for that frame 10 jab, it's important to understand like what your actual options are. So like here with Kuma, he has this really good 1, 2, 3 into the low. Now you can see the Lily is set up to block that low. So that low isn't guaranteed, but it's going to catch a lot of players. And then you have other stuff like Kuma has 1, 1, 1, which is all mids. So you can go for that mix up. Oops, that was 2. But they can still block it. Okay, but it's important to understand what your different opportunities off of jab are. I also have my 2-1, which they have to duck after the first hit, or it just pushes them away. So your frame 10 jab options, most characters have multiple options out of jab. You need to be aware of that. Not everything's necessarily safe, but you should start to learn the purpose for each of your routes, and just be comfortable getting different jab punishes when someone is really trying to abuse frame data and forcing you into that jab position. Okay, so we've been talking about frame data essentially on block, assuming that the other player is going to hit a button. But what if your opponent respects frame data and doesn't hit a button but goes for block themselves? This is where you're going to need to realize what's actually safe and unsafe. So to start off, anything above -9 is generally considered unsafe because jabs are -10. So if you're -10, you can get hit by a jab. A good example of this is Kuma's down forward 2. The first hit of it is -9. So I can hold block if they try and jab me. But if I full commit and go for the... If I full commit and go for the second hit, I can actually get jabbed, and I'm -16, which means I could even get launched with the frame 15 launcher if I go for the second hit. So recognizing that the first hit of that is safe and the second hit is not, I'm going to get punished for it, is really important. These are the things that we have to start to understand what we're going for and what we're going to get punished for. With all this said, I'm going to say exactly what I said in my beginner guide, which is frame data is not everything. Okay, I'm going to show you guys an example where if I jab here, I can still get a launch on her, even though her jab seems just to be even. It's just 0 on block. Okay, so just spacing itself can sort of go around frame data in that situation. So recognizing that Kuma is a really good example of a character with a lot of range on his moves that can sort of punish people, whiff punish, and go around frame data. So whiff punishing is a big concept that you're going to have to remember too. You do need to start learning specific punishes that follow frame data though, or you're going to start struggling against players that play really safe and have good spacing. This is also how you start optimizing your punishes while keeping a consistent level of safe play. It's going to take a lot of time and practice, but it's definitely worth it to start playing more strictly to frame data and more aware of your spacing as well with whiff punishing. Your whiff punishing will get better if you're more aware of frame data. So the second part of this video, I want to talk about punishment training a little bit more in depth. Since my last video, I made it to purple ranks from Shinryu, so I'm happy with the progress I've been making, but I know that if I want to get to the higher ranks, I need to elevate my punishment game by implementing better movement and some more advanced punishment techniques that I didn't talk about in my beginner guide. So first we're going to start with sidestepping. There's 3 things you're going to have to pay attention to with sidestepping. What side you can sidestep certain moves and in general certain characters, your timing of when to actually sidestep stuff, and sidestepping versus side walking is also something that you're going to have to be aware of. I've been struggling to implement it consistently in my actual games, except for like the obvious situations. But that's how it starts. So example I'm going to show you guys is with these 2 moves, just going into your punishment training and just practicing those side steps. Practicing those side steps and also learning what you can get off of them, because if I Oops. Getting those timings. And then learning what you can get off of it. With Kuma, I usually don't get the full combo there, so you have to be aware that you're going to get different things off of your sidesteps as well. Since I play the bears and their sidestep is pretty bad, I need to get really good at this so I can, fully utilize it. Another thing I need to clarify with sidestepping is, just like frame data, there are a lot of characters with frankly too many moves in this game. As much as I love the variety of silly bear moves that I get, everybody else having so many moves makes it hard to learn what to sidestep, and it makes it another one of those things that's going to take a lot of time and practice to get down. If you've made it to purple ranks or even red ranks, you should be thinking about, if not starting to practice and implement sidestepping. We're ready, boys. Sidestepping's not that scary of something. It is definitely something that you should start to be trying to implement because it's really important in a 3D fighter. My last section is also sort of an edit to my beginner guide, but in reality it's just opening up a new option because the skill is a little bit higher now than in the beginner guide. In the beginner guide, I talked about learning fast low options, and this was also because I wasn't super confident in my larger punishes on lows. And to be fair, your fast low options are usually safer and easier to go for in those situations where you're just reacting to a low and you have to do something quickly. With that said, there's a better option that leads to larger punishes on lows, and that is low parries. Low parries require a little bit more execution, but it's nothing crazy. Something you have to also understand is blocking low is usually this mind game. Unless you're generally reacting to someone's moves, you're playing a sort of rock, paper, scissors mind game with them. Usually I'm not reacting to moves unless a player doesn't mix it up or that character really wants to go for a specific thing in a specific situation. But this mind game of lows actually means that I usually know when someone is going to try and hit me with a low, which in my opinion makes low parries a lot more viable. I'm going to try and push them in these situations where I know someone's going to go for a low attack. And yeah, that means that this is something that I'm going to get into punishment training, and I'm going to practice the execution, start figuring out those timings, and also figure out what I can actually get off of these low parries. You got to go in and you got to practice this because you got to figure out what you can get off of it. And you also just want to have that execution so that if you do have to start doing it on the fly in a match, you can actually execute and know what you can get off of it. Okay, so this isn't something I've fully practiced yet, and it's not something I can get super consistently on people, but getting more comfortable with it in punishment training and just understanding what I can convert off of these low parries is really important, and it will be something that I can start cashing in on, on the fly in games when I feel like someone is going to hit me with a low attack. So get in there and start practicing low parries because I do think they're really valuable for that low situation. Hopefully this video will help you improve on these aspects of the game and give you a good perspective on how to do that. But I am going to say one last thing before I end it, and that is this game requires you to seek out answers to improve. I was debating on whether I should explain how to low parry, for example, but I decided not to because you're going to have to look up stuff for this game. Tekken 8 has great resources within the game, especially for me coming from Smash Bros. Training modes. Utilize what's in the game and seek information from online sites like Tekken Wiki if you need to. I've done this a lot, and nobody can give you all the information. You're going to have to investigate and figure out situations for yourself. Anyways, please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. I really appreciate all the support I got for the first video. Shout out to those of you who are trying to improve at Tekken. I'm right there with you. Have a good one.